Hello, BookTube, and welcome to our reading of the Gospel according to St. Luke. We are reading in the King James translation, and we are up to chapter 16, coming hard on the heels of the parable of the prodigal son in chapter 15. So that's a tough act to follow. We'll see what we have here now. It's still Jesus talking, almost exclusively Jesus talking. So this is chapter 16 that we're doing today. And he said also unto his disciples, There was a certain rich man, which had a steward, and the same was accused unto him that he had wasted his goods. And he called him, and said unto him, How is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship, for thou mayest be no longer steward. Then the steward said within himself, What shall I do? For my Lord taketh away from me the stewardship. I cannot dig. To beg I am ashamed. I am resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. So he called every one of his lord's debtors unto him, and said unto the first, How much owest thou unto my lord? And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said unto him, Take thy bill, and sit down quickly, and write 50. Then he said to another, And how much owest thou? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said unto him, Take thy bill, and write 80. And the Lord commended the unjust steward, because he had done wisely. For the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. And I say unto you, make to yourself friends of the mammon of unrighteousness, for when ye fail, they may receive you into everlasting habitations. Jesus goes on to generalize from here, but that story is strange. That's another one you're unlikely to hear from the pulpit on Sunday. That is downright strange. What is not only what's happening in this story, but what's being condoned in this story is downright strange. It's not moral. It's not ethical. But Jesus goes on. And I say unto you, he that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. He that is unjust in least is unjust also in much. If therefore ye have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit you to trust with true riches? And if ye have not been faithful in that which is another man's, who shall give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. I want to point out again here, I had a lot of fun in emails discussing yesterday's chapter. Lots and lots of fruitful stuff to talk about there with the prodigal son. But here, Jesus' contention outside of the parable is simply wrong. And you all know it. Anyone who's ever been a human, anyone who's ever been in human society knows that these two contentions are wrong. Jesus says, He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in that which is much. You know that's not true. In human nature, you know that's not true. A person who will, I don't even know. What's a good example? A bank teller might slip, or a cash register person, a register person working at a register at a retail store. They might slip a $20 bill out of their till and think nothing of it. But they won't steal a payroll. They will not do that for whatever reason, either because they think that stealing the payroll is hurting way too many people, is too much of a bad act, or because they're more likely to be caught. It's more likely to come down to their ill. Either way, the statement that, what is it again? He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much is absolutely not true. And same is true, even more so, of the next one. He that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much. That is absolutely not true. I know countless people who have, you're at a barbecue, and you're standing there chatting, and a beetle is walking across the driveway. I've known countless people in my life who just casually reach out their leg and squish it. They wouldn't kill a person. It's an odd all or nothing thing that Jesus is saying here. Same thing, actually, with the final contention of this section. You cannot serve God and mammon. I would argue that simply interacting with mammon, in other words here, with the unrighteousness of mammon, with the worldly world, with money, simply interacting with it, using it, needing it, spending it, and getting it, It's not the same thing as worshiping it. It's not the same thing as serving it. I don't know quite what to make with this, but then again, I don't know what quite to make of Jesus' relationship with money anyway. It seems pretty clear in a lot of cases that he despises the rich, but he spends a lot of time with them and gives them a lot of ethical outs, as I think he's doing here. But anyway, let's move on. And the Pharisees also, who were covetous, heard all these things, and they derided him. And he said unto them, Ye are they which justify yourselves before men, but God knoweth your hearts. And for that which is highly esteemed among men is an abomination in the sight of God. The law and the prophets were until John, that is John the Baptist, and that is they ruled your world until him. Since that time the kingdom of God is preached, and every man presseth into it. And it is easier for heaven and earth to pass than for one tittle of the law to fail. Whosoever putteth away his wife and marrieth another committeth adultery. And whosoever marrieth her that is put away from her husband committeth adultery. I want to stress that isn't true. Just whether it's Jesus or anybody else, gaslighting is still gaslighting. You claiming something does not make it true. Adultery is when you are in a bond with someone and you cheat on that someone. If that bond is severed, then I know it's weird for someone coming from 50 generations of Catholics to say this, but this is not true. It is not adultery to marry someone who is divorced, obviously. But anyway, let's continue. Let's push on to the end without any more editorial interruptions. Here's another story here. You're going to recognize one of the names. There was a certain rich man, which was clothed in purple and fine linen, and fared sumptuously every day. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate, full of sores, and desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. And it came to pass that the beggar died, and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. And the rich man also died, and was buried. And in hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torments, and seeth Abraham far off, and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water, and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime receivest thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he is comforted, and thou art tormented. And besides all this, between us and you there is a great gulf fixed, so that they which would pass from hence to you cannot, neither can they pass to us that would come from thence. Then he said, I pray, this is Abraham saying, I pray thee therefore, Father, that thou wouldst send him, that is, send Lazarus, to my father's house. For I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they come also into this place of torment. And Abraham saith unto him, They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. And the rich man replies, They have Moses, nay, Father Abraham, but if one went into them from the dead, they will repent. And Abraham said unto him, If they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rose from the dead. And that ends the chapter. That little bit of legalistic casuistry ends the chapter. A very disturbing ending to the chapter. Disturbing, interesting in one way, because here we have a fictional character named Lazarus. He's in a parable. And in that parable he dies, but there is frequent talk in the parable of him being raised from the dead. Of course, other gospel writers take that literally and have an actual character named Lazarus actually raised from the dead. But far worse, I think, are the details of this afterlife, where there's an impassable gulf. People can't go from a place of eternal fiery torment to a place of pure comfort, but they can see each other. They can't pass across that gap, but they can see each other. The people who are in heaven cannot comfort the tormented. They can't cross the gap even if they want to. We don't actually know in this story whether or not Lazarus wants to. We only hear from Abraham. We don't hear from Lazarus. But even if he wanted to, we get the strong impression that he couldn't do it. And I think this is the standard view of the afterlife that holds even now in a nebulous kind of sense for Christians today. And I've never understood it. I absolutely don't understand it. Where virtuous people, virtuous Christians are taken to an afterworld in which They are going to live forever in the presence of their God, but they are going to be aware of the fact of who's not with them. A friend, a relative, a spouse who's not with them and who is instead being tortured with fire forever within sight of them. They can see it. This is not a later church theology. This is a gospel. This is Jesus saying that the blessed in heaven can see the damned in hell. I've never understood that. I've never understood how that works in the Christian mind. No matter what you think of your husband, no matter whether or not you have issues with him, you don't want to see him tortured forever. No human being wants to see someone tortured forever. That is so fundamentally, psychotically inhuman that no human wants to see that. And that's for evil people. For someone who wasn't evil, but who just didn't measure up, so they're not in heaven, they're being tortured forever. This rich man, we don't know if the rich man in this story was ever bad. Just because he didn't give alms to Lazarus, is that the reason why he's condemned to suffer forever? We don't know. We're not explicitly told it. It sounds almost in the parable as if he's being punished because he was rich. The details that are left out would probably explain a lot of what was on the author's mind when he wrote this, but as it is, I don't see how the virtuous Christians in paradise could enjoy themselves, knowing that people that they knew and loved are being tortured forever, especially if they could see it. But even how they could enjoy themselves if they thought that people they didn't like were being tortured forever. Like, picture someone who's absolutely evil. Picture some of the most evil people that the world has ever had. First of all, I don't believe that many of the Christians that I've ever met, who were the best people I've ever met, would want to see that person tortured at all. They would take seriously the doctrine that we heard earlier. Forgive. Forgive them. Apparently that's not the case in the afterworld. In the afterworld that's set up by this God, there isn't any forgiveness. Not even any momentary mercy. I mean, the Lazarus is not even allowed to dip his fingers in water to cool this person's lips for a second. Not only that, not only would the Christians that I've known who were really good people not want, and even the evilest person in the world, to be tortured at all, but even if they were really angry, maybe an evil person killed their whole family, knowingly, slowly, okay, you're only human. You might want to see that person suffer, but not forever. No good human, no ethical human that I've ever met would want that. None of them would be saying, even after a month, keep it up. Give him another month of torturing him night and day. The people in this afterworld don't sleep. This torture never stops. No Christian that I've ever met would want that to happen for even a month, let alone 10 billion years, let alone forever, the rest of time, 24 hours a day nonstop, without any relief at all. It's a horrific vision. I don't know. I've never actually got to the bottom with Christians that I've talked to, and sometimes at great length. I know a couple now who've made it their profession. I've never got to the bottom of how they reconcile that idea. Most of them quietly don't accept it. Most of them say that hell is just that you are without God. And they're even unclear about that. They're even unclear about whether or not hell is you being awake and aware forever and sad that you are without God, or if you just don't exist, where you get to go on forever and ever if you are in the love of the Lord, but otherwise no. It's it's a weird thing, because Christianity exists because of the afterlife. Right? If the resurrection did not happen, our faith is in vain. So it exists entirely because of the afterlife, and yet most Christians that I know have the vaguest idea of what they actually think that afterlife is like. I knew a Christian preacher once years ago who would serenely say of his fellow preachers and other people that he discussed the gospel with on a serious level, he would routinely say, I am confident that I will see them on the streets of heaven. He really believed it. He went to his grave believing it. Really believed that that was true, that I am saved and I feel certain that these brethren in Christ are saved. And when I asked him one day, well, what about your daughter? She's now 22. She's led a pretty rackety life. You've been at odds with her a lot. And he said, well, if she were to die today, no, I wouldn't see her on the streets of heaven. And I said, well, okay, she drives drunk, so she could die today. Are you saying that you would be in heaven forever, knowing not only that she's not there, but that she's being tortured forever, and that would be okay with you? That wouldn't be okay with you now. So are you the same person when you're in heaven as you are now, or are you going to change? And if you're going to change so fundamentally that that wouldn't bother you anymore, then why are you saying that you would go to heaven at all? It's when it's clearly not you. I don't know. These questions fascinate me. I love them. Every once in a while, I've been favored, actually, very, very fortunate in my life, to find a lot of Christians who were able to talk about these things with me. There are quite a few Christians, I'm sure you know some of them, who are so insecure in their faith that they don't want to have these conversations at all. I've been lucky enough to find ones that did, and I find it endlessly fascinating. And here is the root of it. This chapter is the root of it. We are told a little bit about that. We get some world building, some science fiction world building. Not only that you can see from one world to the other, but that you can't pass from one world to the other. Anyway, that is this chapter, much like the last one, in that it's Jesus talking. But this isn't going to stay true. We are building slowly towards the end of this gospel. So we will wrap this up for now, and I will continue next time. Thank you, BookTube.